Hey you! Today we're taking a closer look at 3 alternative and creative research methods that can spice up your design research. Most of us know about the usual and classic, but nonetheless vital research methods. I even have a video where I talk about them and why they're so damn important to master. But we must also venture out and have a little affair with some other also very valuable methods once in a while. I'm Kirstine, and if you like to get down and dirty with your design research, or whatever you do within the social sciences, then give that subscribe button some lovin'. The methods I'm sharing in this video can bring out and give you access to some data that your usual methods can't give you. That's why they're not only good for making research less repetitive, they're also good for doing some good-ass research. Okay, the first method is making rhythm graphs. And what do I mean by making rhythm graphs? Let me show you an example that makes it a bit easier to explain. So simply put, a rhythm graph is a way of capturing the number of people using or moving through a place over time, meaning that it can illustrate the tides and waves of people using the place. So here you can see a hand-drawn rhythm graph that I did for my fieldwork when I was doing my thesis. And in my thesis, I was researching a particular waiting area at a job center. And here you can see that we have an axis here and then an upward and downward axis here. And this axis, the horizontal one, is time in increments of 2 minutes. Up on this axis is the number of people, and here it made sense that 1 unit equaled 1 person. So you can see I'm using a few different colors here. There's some purplish, pinkish ones here, and there's black ones, and then there's also red ones. And as you can see, some of these lines are going up and some of them are going down, and I promise you there's a method to the madness here. I did this graph over a full day at the waiting area where I was jotting down these data. These are from later on in the day, and you can see how they differ throughout the day. So the pinkish purplish ones are the number of people waiting in the waiting area at any given time. And the black lines going upwards, they are the number of times that caseworkers came to pick up citizens. Here you can see, for instance, there's 2 caseworkers coming in these 2 minutes, but only 1 citizen got picked up, and that's what I illustrate by the red lines going down. That means that a citizen was picked up. Then what I did was divide that graph into 3 different graphs to illustrate different data better, because there is a lot of data hidden in that hand-drawn graph. Let's take a look at that. So here you see one of the graphs that came out of that hand-drawn graph. Here we have the number of people, and this is in Danish if you had any doubt that I was from Denmark, and this is time passing. So here you see the black lines still illustrate number of caseworkers coming to pick up citizens in the waiting area, and the red lines are still representing the number of citizens actually being picked up. So these are really interesting data to get, where you can really see how it illustrates the rhythm goings on in this waiting area, and maybe even more so in this graph that shows the number of citizens waiting in the waiting area, and you can see how that has a really clear ebb and flow throughout the day. You can also see here there was the lunch time and how it peaks at certain times and then is very quiet at other times. Okay, so a few examples of how you can use this method is to detect who or what gets to set the agenda in a place, to find out who gets to control the rhythms and actions of others and by what means, and to discover what tides and waves there are and what that means for the practical necessities of the place and how they influence the experience of the place. So you see, there is a lot of juicy data to get from this method. If you're doing a project about a specific place, this method might help you take your insights to that extra level. As you can see, when I did the rhythm graphs, I literally just used paper and different colored markers to distinguish between data, and then I used Excel to make 3 separate graphs out of that. Depending on the scope or traffic of your place, you might need to use other tools to capture and illustrate data, so brainstorm potential tools that could make sense for your specific project. Moving on to the next alternative method, which is using cultural probes. I haven't used this one myself, but I find it really intriguing. I first read about it in an article that was part of my curriculum at university, and I'll write the info of the article in the description so you can check it out if you want to, but I'm gonna draw on the author's example and point about the method in this video. Cultural probes, also called design probes or creative bags, are collections of expressive tasks meant to elicit inspirational responses from people. So it's not for gathering comprehensive information about them, but fragmentary clues about their lives and thoughts and what is truly important to them, especially in cases where direct observation is difficult. So in the example from the article, the designers were a part of a European Union-funded research project aimed at finding new ways to increase the presence of elderly in their communities. In each of these communities, they gave the elderly cultural probes and explained that they were a way for the designers to know them and for them to know the designers. The cultural probes in this example consisted of maps, postcards, cameras, and booklets. In connection with the maps, there were questions like, where have you been in the world? Where do you go to meet people? Where do you like to daydream? And where would you like to go but can't? And on the postcards were handwritten questions that the elderly could answer by writing and sending the answers to the designers. It is exactly in the style of these probes that one of their strengths lays. Postcards can, for instance, connote as an informal and friendly mode of communication, and that allows for questions to be approached more casually. Sometimes official-looking questionnaires or formal meetings can create a distance between the design researchers and the informants, especially if the informants are already a bit skeptical. The designers from this example then also concludes that the real strength of the method was that we had designed and produced the materials specifically for this project, for those people and for their environments. The probes were our personal communication to the elders and prompted the elders to communicate personally in return. There's many more insights about this method in the article, so I recommend checking that out if you consider using cultural probes as an alternative method. The third method is a bit of a variation or expansion to your usual participant observation. Sometimes we can have a tendency to focus on people, actions, and objects when we're doing field work. And maybe we focus on these things by default because they are the most apparent to us and because people, actions, and objects are ultimately the focus of our design. But what made a huge difference in my own research was to start focusing on the sensory stimuli. Sometimes this feels obvious to focus on when we're doing field work, especially if the particular place has extremely loud sounds, smells strongly of something, or is particularly dark. But even when the sensory stimuli is not calling attention on itself by being out of the ordinary, sound, smells, light, temperature, and so on still have an impact on how we experience the world. Through also noticing these sensory aspects, we're able to find some incredibly interesting insights that can evoke innovative and creative design solutions. Not to toot my own horn, and maybe you're tired of hearing about my thesis, but I do have another good illustration from that project that could highlight the value of being sensory oriented. In my thesis research about the waiting area at a job center, I found that in the waiting area, the ticks and tucks of the clock on the wall, the rattling of keys dangling in the hands of people walking through the waiting area, combined with a color scheme of blacks and grays and whites, were all factors in creating emotional distance between the citizens and the authorities. This ultimately makes citizens feel even more like a number in the system and like they are not really welcomed there. I would love to talk about this in detail, so I might do a whole separate video on this. For now, I hope it makes sense to also recognize even less noticeable sensory stimuli as powerful influences on sociality. Given you have made it this far, I assume you have a little crush on design research, so why not go on another little video date and watch one of the videos that will show up in half a second when I stop talking.